Hi, this video has spoilers for Knives Out, Glass Onion, Avatar, and Avatar: The Way of Water. Sequels to movies that didn't appear set up for one are often disappointing. Not always though. Terminator 2 was widely regarded as the best in the series, while Shrek 2 took its irreverent stance on classic fairy tale characters up to an 11. For every Terminator 2 though, there's a Matrix Reloaded. For every Shrek 2, there's a Cars 2. Actually, I could just stop at Cars 1. What I want to cover today is another pair of victims in a long list of sequels, and this time it's personal. Ever since I first watched it about 3 years ago now, Knives Out has been one of my favorite movies. The cozy aspect of the Thrombey house, the eccentric family members which are all complemented by their in-movie relationships, all topped off by a bizarre detective with a rolling, slow drawl. It's a wonderful little whodunit film that catches itself between a microcosm of believable and almost relatable situations. We can understand the mutual turmoil that the Thrombey and Drysdale families have over who gets to inherit the mansion, because those kinds of legal disputes pop up on much smaller scales all the time. Since it is so eerily close to ordinary, the truth becomes obscured, unknown even by the main character herself, until Benoit Blanc helps piece all the information together. And though the mystery takes several turns and involves several different locations, there are two elements we are made most familiar with due to their importance. Number one, we are made extremely familiar with every room of the Thrombey residence where the conflict starts and ends. Number two, the relationships of all the characters. We're never distracted from Harlan Thrombey's death to consider how the Drysdales or Thrombeys are supposed to be at Harlan's residence. We just know this to be fact because that detail is established pretty early on. And therefore, it's up to the audience and Benoit Blanc to sift through the rest of the movie's information. It is a murder mystery that is allowed to unravel itself around a set of loose baseline facts, with flashbacks being considered as testimonials from each individual character. So as far as movies go, I feel satisfied every time I see Knives Out because everything that was established as necessary is resolved. Kind of like sipping on a fine Cabernet Sauvignon after eating a steak dinner. If Knives Out was like a fine wine though, Glass Onion was more akin to a double shot of vodka with lime. Some people might like it, but absolutely not my drink of choice. I wasn't a fan of how most of the movie was spent on understanding how all of the characters related to each other. The relationship, which had been tactfully ignored in Knives Out, was suddenly a central plot point here in Glass Onion. A distraction. In Knives Out, we knew what it meant for the Thrombey or Drysdale family if they lost the home over the will. It's a nice home, after all. But in Glass Onion, each of the characters are so far beyond the common man that it's virtually impossible to relate to any of them. They're not just former business partners reliant on Miles's bank account, they are made out to be superstars in their respective fields, though eccentrically so. It's not enough that, for instance, Duke Cody is a massively popular Twitch streamer, he's also a heavy advocate for masculinism that openly carries a pistol everywhere he goes, even in swimwear. Now, I do stream to Twitch, and I may be a man myself, but since Duke goes so far and above my own realm of understanding, it's very hard to grasp at what significance his career holds. And even worse, it's written to be ridiculous and a meaningless sham because of how the character is treated. And the same goes for Birdie J. She can't just be a model, she's such a ditz that she doesn't understand the meaning of the word subtlety, nor do I think she'd be capable of spelling it either. I've never understood the life of a model and likely never will. I mean, look at me. I'm a Walmart brand Ted Nivison with facial hair. The only two characters that I even remotely understand are Claire DiBella and Lionel Toussaint. Claire, because we see politicians all the time, and Lionel because I grew up with my dad, who happens to be an engineer himself. These two also seem like the smarter and more important of the group, as Claire has the power to legislatively approve the construction of industrial plants, while Lionel is one of the key men running the business. It's even more ironic that these two have possibly the least amount of dialogue in the whole film because they could be contributing so much more, but no. This is a movie about how dumb people are.
Miles Braun is an idiot.
And what do the characters stand to lose at the end of the film? Their extremely lofty social statuses and quantities of money that a lot of us will likely never come close to touching in our lifetimes. The relationships and dependency on Miles Braun weren't all that interesting because of how many there were and how they really didn't matter. After this mystery concludes, none of these characters are going to be seen ever again, wasting the time that was spent trying to convince the audience that these are characters to be taken seriously when they can't be. except for Lionel, but Leslie Odom Jr.'s character has maybe 20 total lines of dialogue for the whole movie. The way that the story is revealed actively degrades the quality of the mystery at hand. Now, Knives Out did this weird thing where every time a part of the story was revealed, it would show that particular moment from their perspective, effectively telling most of the movie through flashbacks. It was acceptable because the entourage of characters had their own unique takes on the story, meaning that the flashbacks were different and vital all the way through. Having the exact details of a murder recounted through the eyes of witnesses or helpfully summarized by the detective at the end of a film is a pretty common whodunit mystery trope, so I can't exactly get mad at that, and I won't. What upsets me more, though, is that most of Glass Onion's mystery was based on a murder that happened off-screen an entire week prior that we were never made privy to previously. So now not only is the cast of characters a hardly amiable or tangible group of socialite jerk-offs, but the mystery itself is obscured behind the fragmented information that comes to a head when Duke Cody is murdered later in the film via intentionally induced anaphylactic shock. Since this movie is so keen on reminding the audience of how much of a sequel it is, it also tries to do the same flashback to this perspective narrative, but instead of ending the conversations on points that are pertinent to the character, relaying them in the indicated time, most information is frustratingly left out by cutting when it's convenient. And even though the information drip is enough to piece together the full story before the reveal happens, Glass Onion consistently likes to point out how dumb everyone is. The intentional withholding of information because of needless adherence to a now senseless narrative structure makes even the audience feel dumb by proxy. Oh wow, you didn't know that this was Cassandra's twin sister even though her death wasn't announced until later in the film, despite the fact that these two characters knew that fact from the start? That's crazy. And even dumber than the narrative structure is the way that Cassandra gets herself murdered. For the whole movie, Edward Norton's character, Miles Braun, has been the one credited with creating this alternative hydrogen-based superfuel, even though the original plans were written on a cocktail napkin by Cassandra. Miles steals the idea, rides the fame to the top, and no one will disprove him otherwise because they're all in his pocket. Or, as they say multiple times throughout the movie, sucking on the golden tit? Why? Cassandra finds the original napkin tucked inside of a long-forgotten book, puts it in a red envelope, and emails the entire squad letting them know she found it. What the Okay, first rule of the internet, don't incriminate yourself online, with the added footnote of, if your message serves as proof that could topple a multi-billion-dollar industry, don't share it, you will fucking die. Oh my god, how dumb can you be? I'm so upset with Glass Onion because of how narratively dissonant it is compared to its prequel, while simultaneously having a resolution that feels predictable and underwhelming. The characters are dumb and unrelatable, and the ones that aren't dumb are either shoved to the side or intentionally obscured because suspenseful writing is too much to ask for. So at the end of it all, what does Glass Onion, a modern whodunit film, have to offer? Well, at least it looks nice. Prove my point even further, though, that some recent films have arbitrated their narrative for the sake of impressive visual appearances, I'd like to now direct your attention to Avatar: The Way of Water. James Cameron's Avatar, released in 2009, is my youngest sister's favorite movie. To poorly summarize what she told me, she enjoys it for the unique world building and science fiction aspect of it that most other science fiction properties have never explored, set against the backdrop of a straightforward narrative goal. Sure, Avatar's story can be condensed down to Pocahontas but in space and more blue, yet the way that it's paced makes sense for what it's trying to achieve. Look at this big beautiful tree and how humanity is so keen on enforcing its power for narrow-minded financial gain. Jake was a clear bridge between humanity and the Na'vi, being someone who understood both of their goals and was forced into choosing a side. The side he chose was based off of fairly understandable motivations. The Avatar body gave him his legs back, he believed in protecting the culture of the Na'vi, and I'd let a 10-foot tall Zoe Saldana pick me up, and not to mention that the supporting cast of Avatar was cheesy, but fun and memorable without being overbearing. The exceptions to the rule might have been Trudy and Quaritch, but even then they appropriately fulfilled the roles that they needed to. And of course, there are several criticisms to be leveled with 2009's Avatar. The CG hasn't held up in the 14 years since its release, the story doesn't have all that much depth to it, and the name Unobtainium for the secret mineral underground is probably the laziest name that I've ever heard. You mean to tell me that some people will dedicate hours upon hours of their lives designing this gorgeous planet, including a culture and a language system, and yet the best name that the humans can come up with for this precious resource rock is unobtainium? Actually, now that I think about it, that's kind of the point, isn't it? I'd be lying if I didn't say that the writing felt a little too direct. Not so much that the point shouldn't be made because we're doing a terrible job taking care of our planet as it is, but more that there's not a whole lot more to it. Humanity tries to scour resources with no regard for indigenous life. The main character is the alleged chosen one because AWA says so, and there's a big CG battle at the end of the movie. Straightforward? Sure. Nuanced? Not at all. Additionally, I can ignore the whole Chosen One storyline that's been beaten to death since the birth of fiction because the movie was more about the setting and Jake Sully's physical transformation. The dichotomy between the metallic grays, the human base, and the glowing, sprawling forests of Pandora eases the transitions between scenes. In the time that I spend looking at nothing in the research base clearly dominated by a human population, I often find myself wanting to see more and more of the world of Pandora because of how much more fascinating it is by comparison. And since the world itself is brand new at this point in time, there's a lot of discovery that goes into it as well. The floating mountains, the new creatures, the culture of the Na'vi, etc. Even if the story isn't all that great, the movie is still engaging for a first watch because of what it tries to establish. Avatar and the Way of Water, on the other hand, might I refer you back to the title of this video? There's no denying that A2 is visually stunning. In the years that it took to create the film, technology for artistic and editing software has become exponentially more powerful, and I was personally impressed with how a lot of this movie looked. The opening shot of Neytiri's face has a lot of minute detail and texturing that we generally didn't get to see in the first film, and it's further expanded upon by the water in this movie. One of the most difficult things to get absolutely right in any piece of cinema, hell even in this video, is the lighting, as bad lighting can distract from the shot. We can even consider something much more accessible in the sense of streaming or video editing. I don't have the greatest camera known to mankind, as you can tell by the number of pixels you can probably count on the screen. However, what really makes this standard camera placement look good or bad can be changed entirely by this one ring light that I have. And now consider the time that it takes to make the lighting look good, then consider what has to be translated first onto a 3D animated object, and then again onto a wet 3D animated object. A computer program does not understand the basics of shading. It does not respond naturally to light like a physical object does, so you have to tell it how to respond, which often leads to CGI looking awful in lower budget movies or television shows. For everything to look cohesive and vibrant is nothing short of impressive, at least at this point in history for the tech we currently have, and I do think that Avatar: The Way of Water winning the Oscar for Best Visual Effects was absolutely deserved. When I first saw this movie, I saw it in theaters and I got the 2D showing instead of 3D. Some people who saw it in 3D said that there were some consistent frame rate issues where the frame rate would change between shots, making it seem rather video gamey, but I never really noticed it with the 2D showing. Maybe I was too distracted trying to enjoy the film with my friends and family at the time, but that still didn't stop all of us, including my sister who loves the first film, from mutually agreeing that the story was exceedingly lackluster. In some ways, I understand the script taking the direction that it did. 13 years had passed between the release of the original film and this one, meaning that a lot of onboarding had to be done to both bridge the gap of in-universe time and introduce a whole new generation to the IP. I was 11 years old when the first Avatar came out. I am now 24. This final will and testament isn't going to write itself. To kick things off, the movie gives us a little bit of handy exposition to catch everyone up to speed and say that yes, things have been going well. Jake and Sully have produced 4 children, while the evil humans have been told to piss off, which they do until they come back again because they still want the resources and because they can't return to their dying or dead planet. In the time that the humans have spent recuperating, several other things have broadly changed, most notably this mystery child whom we know is the son of Miles Quaritch and some unknown woman. Everyone knows him as Spider, and he's this universe's version of Tarzan, basically. All of the remaining humans and the local Na'vi are perfectly content with each other's existence, using each other's technology and knowledge to advance civilization. All is well with the world of Pandora, until one night Jake notices a gleam in the sky, a telltale sign of human ships entering the planet's orbit once again. At first, the Na'vi's countermeasures were largely successful. Thanks to Jake's knowledge of both the planet and of human weaponry, he combines them both pretty well to stymie their presence. Then, suddenly, Jake's children get involved, the humans take notice, and their mission turns from extracting resources from the planet to a planet-wide manhunt. And this forces Jake and family to relocate to another tribe across the planet, using his status as the chosen one with the Na'vi to force his way into the Water Tribe, and thus the title of the movie is made clear. From here, it's a complete retelling of the first movie with the assumption that we've both seen but haven't seen the first movie. Yes, it is possible to argue that this movie needed a reset in order to explain itself to a newer generation, but that argument falls apart when we consider the number of callbacks throughout the movie's runtime. And plus, it's bizarre to assume that nobody will go back to watch the first Avatar just because 13 years have passed between the release of these two movies. The day before the movie was released in the United States, one of the most popular reviews on Letterboxd was a comment about the first movie. Clearly, people were watching it enough for this comment to spark the level of interest that it did. And despite Avatar 2 being over 3 hours in length though, the pacing was all over the place, and I owe that to it trying to do too much all at once. First, we need to establish what's changed over the last 15 years in narrated exposition. Then, we need to create conflict to make this an interesting action movie, so we're bringing the humans back in order to give Jake a reason to leave the Na'vi behind. They try fighting the humans off, but the youngest child gets kidnapped during one scene, so everyone else has to save her, leaving Jake with the decision to leave the forest behind. There's this scene where he and Neytiri argue about it, then there's a scene handing over the leadership of the forest people to this guy. Who is this guy? We don't know, and also don't care because we need to get to the water. Also, Quaritch is back, because screw trying to make new villains. How is he back? Well, there's this throwaway line that basically says that humanity holds the key to immortality, but it's treated like it's no big deal. This was also apparently something that happened during the continuity of the first movie, but was conveniently never covered. Hey, isn't the entire process of making an avatar body while also saving every moment of someone's human consciousness on a flash drive bit of a scientific marvel? If they're acting so nonchalant about it here, why wasn't this technology used in the previous movie when humanity could have used the leg up against the natives of Pandora? Jake and family meet with the head of the Water Tribe, and their kids get bullied for not being able to swim until they can, because these people are racist. Here at the Water Tribe, they don't have the same flyers that the forest people did, but instead these water skipper lizards that have the same bond, and then these giant whale creatures are also here to be the next MacGuffin in the fight against humanity that just randomly crops up out of nowhere, because the original reason that we understand why the humans came back was for more of that sweet, sweet unobtainium. Turns out, the whales have this elixir of eternal life stored in their brain juices that sells for around $80 million a kilogram, despite zero indication prior that this was the resource that the humans even wanted. Most of their efforts look concerted on taking over the same place where they had a foothold initially and expanding through the enormous forest from there. Maybe these trained cars held unobtainium harvested from the fallen mother tree, but the only time that humanity shows interest in whale brain fluid is shown after Quaritch initiates a planetary manhunt for Jake Sully and his family. In the first Avatar, the plan was very simple. One team wants to research the Na'vi and the planet of Pandora, while the military outfit wants to overtake it and acquire precious resources. The balance between these two conflicting ideologies was at the core of discovering the world, as something seen only as a trifling obstruction by the militant group was a site of extreme cultural significance to the more scientific one. So placing Jake Sully in between both of these worlds was perfect, because we got to understand how both of them operated and how both of them contributed to his character growth. Quite literally, in fact. But now, with Avatar 2, humanity wants a precious resource that isn't clearly communicated, while Jake also prepares to defend his family. By doing so, he has to travel across the planet to an entirely different culture where we have to learn everything from square one again. In the meantime though, Spider, that human kid that I mentioned earlier, goes on to help the bad human guys that are now avatars, leading them through the exact same steps that Jake spent the entire movie learning, but in the space of a few minutes by comparison. Not only do we have the whole first movie again of Jake being a fish out of water, and yes, that pun was totally intentional, you can go f*** yourself because I'm not apologizing, and having to learn a new culture, but the same thing is happening simultaneously with resurrected Quaritch and his cronies. Except the difference is that while Jake might have some depth to his character in his flaws, we do not care about Quaritch and crew at all. The rehashing of the same plot points doesn't help either. The caveat, however, is that the movie needs to both explain how the humans can be resurrected using a memory chip implanted into an avatar body, and how that's become a significant threat to the livelihood of everyone on the planet. Yet this entire point is sideswiped by the whale brain juice agenda that comes out of nowhere, and then further buried by how this movie chooses to start conflict. Jake is a family man. We get that from the opening narration and the squabbles that he has with his sons.
Yeah, screw you, Dad. I'm going head first into war with an alien race wielding a rifle because that's cool. Look at me, how I'm rebelling by not being careful, and now the family man Jake has to come and rescue me. Whoa!
Every single time this movie wanted to create tension or start some sort of conflict, they made sure to put the youngest child in danger. All the other 3 kids escape. Took got caught by the Marines. Fight breaks out and combat looks like it's been cleared fully. Looks like Took is in trouble and needs rescuing by the other members of the family again. It was very difficult for me to get interested in or largely remember most of the plot because of how it was either a rehash of the first movie or felt extremely juvenile in its writing. Furthermore, by introducing and reintroducing a whole slew of threats to create artificial conflict on top of the immeasurable weight of having to explain to the audience how a whole new facet of this world works, the writing itself suffers. I didn't even get to talk about Sigourney Weaver's character being the messiah of the world, or the weight of the emotional bonds that the characters have to their animals. I didn't manage to get around to talking about the combat sequences or creature design specific to this Pacific Island inspired location. And that's all because of how the movie is so cluttered that it becomes forgettable, further emphasized by the fact that the strong foundation the first movie laid down has no bearing on this one aside from an overdose of member berries. But you know what? At least it looks nice. I don't doubt that the animators worked extremely hard on this movie and probably burnt through enough nuclear power processing the 3D animation to punch a new hole in the ozone layer. If anything, I'm frustrated that the breadth of their talent is gatekept by a confusing and ultimately boring plot. I'm not going to read a book if its writing sucks despite how much it tries to convince me that its characters are really cool. Similarly, I'm not going to sit through a 3-hour-plus movie if the writing does not elevate the medium that it is presented in. I want to be able to say that Avatar is a good movie because of the talent on display and because I know people who genuinely enjoyed the first film. And I want to be able to say that Glass Onion is a good movie as well because I enjoyed the first film and again, because of the talent on display. But despite looking nice though, there's not a whole lot of good that I can say about them. Now this argument of course extends beyond these 2 movies, and I want to hear from you all. Do you think that there are movies that look visually incredible or were at least not visually offensive, but were ultimately undercut by poor writing? And do you agree or disagree with my sentiments? Let me know in the comments down below. And that's all I have for this video. I hope you all enjoy this kind of shift in content emphasis that I'm introducing with this video, and I hope to see you all in the next one when it comes out. So take care, safe travels, and goodbye.